All ships in position near Neptune, as Admiral Kim ordered, Suanai replied. The Admiral's flagship is hailing us now. Jiho straightened his uniform jacket. On screen. The face of Admiral Taiwan Kim appeared. The older man's expression was grim, his gray hair neatly combed back, his eyes showing the weight of command. Captain Park, I'm calling all ship captains to a meeting in 1 hour. The VX fleet has stopped at the edge of our solar system. We need to plan our defense. Yes, Admiral. I'll be there, Jiho said. After the call ended, Jiho turned to Suanai. What do you think they're waiting for? Suanai frowned. Perhaps they're hoping we'll surrender without a fight. The VX don't seem the type to hope, Jiho said. They've conquered 3 star systems in the last year. They don't ask for surrender until after they've shown their power. Chief Engineer Jun Hong entered the bridge. He was a short man with quick hands and an even quicker mind. Captain, I've completed the checks on our new system, Jiho nodded. The Dauntless carried something special, a new weapon called the Quantum Displacement Device, or QDD. It was still experimental, never used in actual combat. And? Jiho asked. Juno's face showed worry. It works in simulations, but there are still many unknowns. Using it in battle would be a big risk. Jiho looked back at the screen showing the enemy fleet. We may have to take that risk, Juno. An hour later, Jiho sat at a large table with the other ship captains. Admiral Kim stood at the head of the table, pointing to a 3D map of their solar system. The VX fleet has established a blockade here, just beyond Pluto's orbit, the Admiral said. They haven't moved further in yet, but their intentions are clear. They want Earth and its resources. Captain Gong of the ship Intrepid raised her hand. She was one of Jiho's oldest friends, having trained with him at the academy. What are our orders, Admiral? Even with the planetary defense systems, we can't match their numbers. Admiral Kim's face hardened. We fight, Captain Gong. We have no choice. The Mars colonies are preparing additional ships, but they won't be ready for at least 2 weeks. We must hold until then. The room grew quiet as the captains considered their slim chances. Jiho studied the map, noticing something about the VX formation. Admiral, he said, standing up, may I approach the map? Kim nodded, and Jiho walked to the front of the room. He pointed to the center of the VX fleet. Based on data from their previous attacks, the VX always protect their command ships in the center of their formation. Their entire battle network depends on these central ships. If we could disrupt this command structure, we might gain an advantage. Captain Miho Choi from the defense ship Guardian scoffed. And how do you suggest we get past 300 ships to hit their center? This isn't one of your famous Academy tactical games, Park. Jiho remained calm. The Dauntless carries the new QDD weapon. If it works as designed, it could create enough chaos in their formation to give us an opening. Admiral Kim frowned. The QDD is untested in combat, Captain Park. And even if it works, you'd need to get dangerously close to their fleet. One ship might be able to slip through, especially if the rest of the fleet creates a distraction, Jiho suggested. The Admiral shook his head. Too risky. We can't sacrifice a ship on an untested theory. He turned to address the whole room. Our strategy will be to engage at maximum range, then fall back toward Earth in coordinated waves. Each retreat will bring us closer to our planetary defenses. Understood? The captains nodded, though many faces showed doubt. The meeting ended, and Jiho prepared to return to his ship. Captain Gong caught up with him in the corridor. You don't agree with the Admiral's plan, she said. It wasn't a question. Jiho sighed. It's the safest approach with what we know, but I don't think it will work. The VX will overwhelm us before we reach Earth's defense perimeter. Gong studied her old friend's face. You're planning something, aren't you? Jiho gave her a small smile. Just thinking through all options, that's all. Back on the Dauntless, Jiho spent hours in his quarters studying every piece of information they had on the VX, their attack patterns, their ship designs, their command structure. There had to be a weakness. Near ship's midnight, he found it. The VX fleet's communication system always followed the same pattern during their attacks. Their command ships sent signals to the rest of the fleet every 45 seconds. These signals kept the fleet moving as one perfect unit. If those signals were disrupted even for a short time. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Suanai entered with a data pad. "Sir, we've received a transmission from the VX fleet," she said, her face pale. "It's addressed to all Earth forces." Jiho took the pad and played the message. A tall, gray-skinned alien appeared on screen, Grand Marshal Kulin of the VX Imperium. His voice was surprisingly smooth for such a fearsome creature. "People of Earth, your planet is now claimed by the VX Imperium. Your resources are ours by right of strength. You have 12 hours to surrender your fleet and disable your defense systems. If you comply, your people will be allowed to live as workers of the Imperium. If you resist, we will destroy your fleet and bombard your planet until all resistance ends. The choice is yours." The message ended, leaving Jiho staring at a blank screen. "Captain." Suanai's voice pulled him back. "Admiral Kim has ordered radio silence. No response is to be sent." Jiho nodded slowly. "Gather the senior officers in the briefing room in 20 minutes. After Suanai left, Jiho looked out his small window at the distant stars. 12 hours. In 12 hours, the VX would attack, and Earth's small fleet would begin a fighting retreat that would likely end in defeat. Unless someone did something unexpected. The senior officers of the Dauntless sat around the briefing room table, watching as Jiho displayed his findings on the main screen. "The VX fleet depends on constant communication from their command ships," he explained. "Every 45 seconds, precise instructions go out to each ship in their fleet. This is why they move with such perfect coordination." Security Chief Miho Choi leaned forward. "So if we could block those signals, their formation would fall apart." "At least temporarily," Jiho finished. Navigation Officer Duan Kong shook his head. "But we can't block signals across an entire fleet that size." "We don't need to," Jiho said. "We just need to hit their command ships directly. And I believe the QDD could do that." He turned to Juno. "If we modified the QDD to target the specific frequency the VX command ships use, could it disrupt their entire network?" Juno thought for a moment. "In theory, yes. The quantum field would create chaos in their communication systems. But Captain, we'd need to get very close to their command ships." "How close?" Jiho asked. "Less than 10,000 kilometers. Right in the heart of their fleet." The room fell silent as everyone realized what Jiho was suggesting. Communications Officer Hae-yun spoke up. "Captain, are you suggesting we disobey Admiral Kim's orders?" Jiho looked at each of his officers in turn. These people were more than his crew, they were his family. What he was considering might cost them their lives. "I'm suggesting we have a choice to make," he said quietly. "Follow orders and almost certainly watch Earth fall, or take a chance, a big risk, that might give Earth a fighting chance." Suanai stood up. "Sir, with respect, this sounds like suicide." Jiho nodded. "It might be. That's why I won't order anyone to join me. I can pilot the Dauntless with a skeleton crew. Anyone who wants to transfer to another ship before we depart will have my full support." The officers exchanged glances, then Juno spoke. "You'll need someone to operate the QDD. I built the damn thing. I'm in." One by one, each officer nodded their agreement. They would stay. They would fight. Jiho felt a surge of pride mixed with a deep sadness. These brave people were willing to follow him on what might be a one-way mission. "Thank you," he said simply. "Now let's prepare. We have less than 11 hours to ready everything." As the meeting ended and his officers filed out, Jiho remained seated, staring at the image of the massive VX fleet on the screen. Soon, the Dauntless would move toward that fleet. One small ship against an armada. But sometimes, one ship was all you needed to change the course of a war. The next 6 hours passed quickly as the crew of the Dauntless prepared for their mission. Captain Jiho Park had not yet told Admiral Kim of his plan. He knew the Admiral would order him to stand down, and Jiho had already decided he could not obey such an order. In engineering, Chief Juno Kong worked frantically to modify the quantum displacement device, his hands moving quickly over the complex machine, adjusting settings and rerouting power connections. "Will it work?" Jiho asked, entering the engineering section. Juno wiped sweat from his forehead. "I've tuned it to the exact frequency the VX command ships use. In theory, it should create a quantum field that will scramble their communications. But Captain, there's something else you should know." Jiho braced himself. "Go on." "The power requirements are massive. Once we activate the QDD, we'll lose most of our shield strength. And if the device becomes unstable..." Juno paused. "Well, the results would be unpredictable." "Meaning?" "Meaning we could create a quantum singularity that would destroy us and anything nearby," Juno said bluntly. Jiho nodded slowly. The risk was even greater than he had thought. But the alternative, watching Earth fall to the VX, was unacceptable. "Keep working," he said. "Make it as stable as you can." On the bridge, Suanai was running battle simulations, trying to find the best approach vector to the heart of the VX fleet. "Any luck?" Jiho asked, joining her at the tactical station. "Not much," she admitted. "Every simulation ends with us taking critical damage before we reach the target area. The VX's outer defenses are too strong." Jiho studied the simulation. The problem was clear: any direct approach would be spotted immediately, and the Dauntless would be destroyed long before reaching the command ships. "What if we don't go straight in?" he suggested. "What if we use Neptune's gravity to slingshot around and approach from an unexpected angle?" Suanai ran the new simulation. The results improved slightly, but not enough. "We'd still be detected too early," she said. Jiho thought for a moment. "What about this? We don't run silent. Instead, we broadcast an emergency distress signal. Make it look like we've had a major system failure." Suanai's eyes widened. "A damaged ship drifting toward their fleet, they might not see us as a threat." "Exactly. They might even ignore us completely." She ran the new simulation. This time, the Dauntless reached much closer to the center of the VX fleet before being engaged. "It could work," she said, a small spark of hope in her voice. "But we'd still take heavy damage once they realize what we're doing." "One problem at a time," Jiho said with a grim smile. "Let's go with this plan." In his quarters, Jiho recorded a message for Admiral Kim, explaining his decision and accepting full responsibility. He also recorded personal messages for his parents and sister back on Earth. When finished, he sat quietly for a moment, thinking about the home he might never see again. His door chimed, and Security Chief Miho entered. "Captain, there's something you need to know," Miho said, his face serious. "Some of the crew have guessed what we're planning. They're talking." Jiho frowned. "Do you think someone will report to the Admiral?" "No," Miho said firmly. "That's what I came to tell you. I've spoken with every person on this ship. All 143 crew members are with you. No one is asking for a transfer." Jiho felt a lump in his throat. He had expected most of the crew would want to leave once they understood the danger. "They all know this might be a one-way trip." Miho nodded. They know. But they also know what happens if the VX reach Earth. Many have families there. They're willing to take the risk. Jiho stood and placed a hand on Miho's shoulder. Thank you for telling me. Make sure everyone knows what their jobs will be when we make our move. After Miho left, Jiho contacted Captain Gong on the Intrepid using a private channel. Gong, I need to ask you something important, he said when her face appeared on screen. She looked at him knowingly. You're going to do it, aren't you? Take the Dauntless in alone. Yes. But I need to know that someone will be ready to lead the counterattack when the VX formation breaks apart. Gong was silent for a moment. You know I can't promise that. Admiral Kim is in command. But if the opportunity arises. Jiho pressed. She sighed. If there's an opening, I'll do what needs to be done. Just try to come back alive, old friend. I'll do my best, Jiho promised, though they both knew his chances were slim. With 4 hours remaining before the VX deadline, the final preparations were complete. The QDD was ready, the approach vector calculated, and every crew member was at their station. Jiho gathered his senior officers for one last meeting. This is your final chance to voice any concerns, he told them. Once we begin, there's no turning back. Navigation Officer Duan spoke first. The course is plotted, Captain. But I must warn you, we'll be vulnerable during the initial phase while we pretend to drift. Understood. How long will we be in weapons range before we can activate the QDD? About 90 seconds, Duan replied, 90 seconds where we'll be fully exposed to their weapons. Jiho turned to Communications Officer Hae-yun. Is our distress signal ready? Hae-yun nodded. Yes, Captain. I've created a very convincing malfunction report. It should buy us the time we need. And the QDD? Jiho asked. As ready as it can be, the engineer replied. But remember, we'll only get one shot. The device will burn out after use. Finally, Jiho looked at Suanai. Tactical assessment. Suanai's face was grave. If everything goes perfectly, we have a 36% chance of success. If anything goes wrong. She didn't finish the sentence. Jiho took a deep breath. I know I'm asking all of you to risk everything. If anyone wants to back out, now is the time. The room was silent. No one moved. Jiho felt pride swell in his chest. Then let's prepare to depart. We move in 1 hour. Exactly 1 hour later, the Dauntless quietly broke formation with the Earth fleet. On the bridge, Jiho gave the order to begin broadcasting their fake distress signal. Almost immediately, his communication panel lit up. Admiral Kim was hailing them. Do we respond? Hae-yun asked. Jiho shook his head. No, maintain communication silence. But make sure our distress signal includes engine failure as the reason we can't respond. Hae-yun nodded and adjusted the signal. On his screen, Jiho could see several ships from the Earth fleet changing course, moving to intercept the Dauntless. Admiral Kim clearly intended to bring them back. Increased speed, Jiho ordered. We need to get out of their reach before they can stop us. The Dauntless surged forward, its engines pushing to maximum power. The pursuing Earth ships fell behind as the Dauntless raced toward Neptune. Sir, Suanai reported, Admiral Kim is ordering all ships to hold position. He's not sending anyone after us. Jiho nodded. The Admiral was smart, he wouldn't risk more ships on what looked like a suicide mission. How long until we reach the slingshot point around Neptune? Jiho asked. 17 minutes, Duan answered from the navigation station. Jiho settled into his captain's chair, watching as Neptune grew larger on the main screen. Soon they would swing around the giant planet, using its gravity to fling them toward the waiting VX fleet at high speed. There was no going back now. The Dauntless shot around Neptune like a stone from a sling, its speed increasing dramatically. As they emerged from behind the planet, the vast VX fleet became visible again, still holding position at the edge of the solar system. "Cut main engines," Jiho ordered. "Begin broadcasting the distress signal at full strength." The ship's engines went silent, and the Dauntless continued forward on momentum alone, appearing to drift helplessly toward the enemy fleet. "Now we wait," Jiho said quietly. Minutes passed in tense silence. The VX fleet grew larger on their screens as they approached. "Any reaction from the VX?" Jiho asked. "Nothing yet," Haeyun replied. "Wait. I'm detecting communication between their outer ships. They've spotted us." Everyone held their breath, waiting to see if the VX would fire on what appeared to be a disabled ship. "They're not targeting us," Suanai reported with surprise. "They're moving aside." Jiho allowed himself a small smile. The ruse was working. The VX saw them as a drifting, broken ship, not a threat. "Maintain course and signal," he ordered. "Let's see how close they let us get." The Dauntless continued its apparent drift, passing the outer ring of VX ships. None fired on them, some even moved out of their path, as if avoiding collision with the human ship. "This is going better than expected," Miho commented from his security station. "Don't celebrate yet," Jiho cautioned. "The hard part is still ahead." As they moved deeper into the VX formation, Jiho studied the enemy ships on his screen. They were massive, some 10 times the size of the Dauntless. Their dark hulls were covered with weapon ports, and their engines glowed an eerie purple. "Distance to the command ships?" he asked. 30,000 kilometers and closing, Duan reported. "We'll be in QDD range in approximately 6 minutes. Jiho nodded. "All hands, prepare for battle stations. The moment they realize what we're doing, they'll open fire with everything they have." The crew tensed, ready for the coming fight. The Dauntless continued its silent approach, drifting deeper into the heart of the enemy fleet. In the center of the bridge, Jiho watched the distance counter tick down. Soon they would make their move, one small ship against the might of an empire. The Dauntless drifted deeper into the VX fleet. On the bridge, the crew watched in tense silence as enemy ships surrounded them on all sides. Their plan was working so far, the VX believed they were a damaged ship floating helplessly through their formation. "Distance to target, Captain?" Jiho asked, his voice low. 20,000 kilometers, Duan replied from the navigation station. "We'll be in optimal range in 3 minutes. Jiho nodded. "Juno, status of the QDD?" The chief engineer's voice came through the comm system. "Power levels stable, Captain. The device is ready to activate on your command." Jiho turned to Suanai. "Any change in the VX behavior?" Suanai studied her tactical display. "No targeting locks on us yet, but there's increased communication between ships near our path. I think they're starting to wonder why we're drifting straight toward their command center." "We won't fool them much longer," Jiho said. "Miho, bring weapon systems to standby. Don't power them up fully yet, but be ready." "Yes, Captain," the security chief responded. On the main screen, Jiho could now see the VX command ships. They were massive vessels, easily 5 times the size of the Dauntless, with distinctive purple energy fields surrounding them. 3 of these giant ships formed a triangle at the center of the fleet. "Those are our targets," Jiho said, pointing to the screen. "The QDD needs to hit the center of that formation." The minutes ticked by slowly as the Dauntless continued its approach. The crew's breathing seemed abnormally loud in the quiet bridge as everyone waited for the moment and the VX would see through their deception. 15,000 kilometers, Duan announced. 10 minutes. They were getting dangerously close now, too close for the VX to ignore. "Captain," Haeyun called from the communication station, "we're being hailed by one of the VX ships." This was it. Ignore it, Jiho ordered. Maintain radio silence. They're hailing again, Hae-yun reported, more urgently this time. Distance now 12,000 kilometers, Duan said. On the tactical display, several VX ships began to move, adjusting their positions to intercept the Dauntless. They've figured it out, Suanai said. Detecting energy buildup in nearby ships. They're preparing to fire. Jiho made his decision. Drop the act. Full power to engines. Miho, bring all weapons online. Duan, set course directly for the center of those command ships. The bridge erupted into activity as the crew carried out his orders. The Dauntless surged forward, its engines roaring to life after the long drift. VX ships moving to intercept, Suanai reported. Multiple weapons locks detected. Evasive pattern Omega 3, Jiho commanded. The Dauntless began a series of sharp, unpredictable movements, making it harder for the VX's targeting systems to lock onto them. But there were simply too many enemy ships. Energy weapons firing. Suanai shouted. The Dauntless shook as the first VX beams struck their shields. Warning alarms blared across the bridge. Shield strength at 82%, Miho reported. Returning fire. The Dauntless fired back, its weapon striking the closest VX ship, but the enemy vessel's shields easily absorbed the attack. Our weapons aren't doing much damage, Miho said grimly. They don't need to, Jiho replied. We just need to get to the command ships. Distance 9,000 kilometers, Duan answered. We're almost in range for the QDD. Another volley of VX weapons hit the Dauntless, this time from multiple directions. The ship shuddered violently, and several consoles sparked with electrical discharges. Shields down to 64%, Miho reported. We've got hull breaches on decks 4 and 5. Seal those sections, Jiho ordered. Juno, how much closer do we need to be for the QDD to work? 8,000 kilometers is optimal, Juno's voice came back, accompanied by the sound of alarms in engineering. We're taking heavy damage down here, Captain. The power conduits to the QDD are holding for now, but I don't know for how long. Jiho looked at the tactical display. The Dauntless was now surrounded by VX warships, all firing at them. They were taking hits from every direction. Distance 8,500 kilometers, Duan announced. Almost there, Jiho said. Hold course. The ship rocked again as another blast hit them directly. This time, the lights on the bridge flickered, and several systems went offline momentarily. Shields at 41%, Miho reported, his voice strained. We can't take much more of this. We don't need to, Jiho replied. Distance 8,200 kilometers, Duan said. Jiho opened a ship-wide channel. All hands, brace for impact. We're about to activate the QDD. He turned to Hae-yun. Send a message to the Earth fleet. Tell them we're about to create an opening. They need to attack now. Hae-yun nodded, her fingers flying over her console. Message sent, Captain, but I don't know if it got through the VX jamming. It'll have to be enough, Jiho said. Duan. 8,000 kilometers, Captain. We're in optimal range. Jiho took a deep breath. Juno, activate the QDD. Now. Meanwhile, back at Neptune's orbit, Admiral Kim watched the distant battle with growing concern. When the Dauntless had broken formation hours earlier, he had been furious. Captain Park had disobeyed direct orders, risking his ship and crew on what seemed like a foolish gamble. But now, as the Admiral watched the small ship fight its way into the heart of the VX fleet, he began to wonder if Jiho might have been right. Sir, his communications officer called, we're receiving a broken transmission from the Dauntless. It's hard to make out through the interference. Put it through, Kim ordered. Through heavy static, he heard Hae-yun's voice, creating opening. Attack now, repeat, attack now. At that moment, something strange happened at the center of the VX fleet. A bright blue light appeared, expanding outward in a perfect sphere. As it grew, VX ships caught in its radius began to drift aimlessly, their lights flickering and dying. "What's happening?" Kim demanded. "I don't know, sir," his science officer replied. "Some kind of energy field is disrupting the VX ships. Their power systems appear to be failing." Admiral Kim made a quick decision. "All ships, advance. Target the disabled VX vessels first. Captain Gong, take your battle group and push toward that opening." The Earth fleet surged forward, weapons firing at the now vulnerable VX ships. Aboard the Dauntless, the bridge was filled with a brilliant blue light as the QDD activated. The device created a quantum displacement field that spread outward from the ship, interfering with the energy systems of every VX vessel it touched. "It's working!" Suanai exclaimed. "The VX ships are losing power." Jiho watched as the command ships directly ahead of them began to drift, their purple shields flickering and failing. "Keep pushing forward," he ordered. "Get us as close to the command ships as possible before the effect wears off." The Dauntless pressed deeper into the heart of the enemy fleet, passing disabled VX ships as it went. But the victory was short-lived. "Captain," Juno's worried voice came through the comm, "the QDD is becoming unstable. The power draw is too much for our damaged systems." As if to emphasize his point, the ship shook violently, and several power conduits exploded around the bridge. "How long do we have?" Jiho asked. "Minutes, maybe less," Juno replied. "If the containment field fails while the device is active, the resulting quantum backwash will destroy the ship." Jiho looked at the tactical display. The Earth fleet was advancing now, taking advantage of the opening they had created. But the effect wouldn't last long enough for them to reach the command ships. "Can we deactivate the QDD safely?" he asked. "No," Juno answered. "Once started, the process has to complete. And Captain, there's something else. The displacement field is creating a feedback loop with the VX command ship's power cores. If we get any closer to them, it might trigger a chain reaction." Jiho understood immediately. Such a reaction would destroy the command ships, and the Dauntless with them. He made his decision. "Suanai, take command of evacuation procedures. Get as many of the crew to the escape pods as possible." Suanai stared at him. "Captain. That's an order, Commander. I'm going to take the Dauntless directly into the command ship's formation. The resulting reaction should destroy their entire command structure." "Sir, let me stay with you," Suanai protested. Jiho shook his head. "Earth needs every good officer it can get. Now go, get the crew to safety."